eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
What the hell is going on, everybody? Nice to see you all. We're back. We have a repaired cable thanks to Suki. She's making amends on what she chewed up yesterday, so there will be no more silent, awkward outros like there was yesterday. Hopefully never again. But we're back. And Rusty's already thrown in $5. My man, Killsy and Samantha. Sorry, Killsy's just joined. Welcome. Thank you very much. And Samantha's gifted a membership. Unreal generosity. You guys are absolute legends. In here before the streams even started. And Susie Sunshine put in $8 and says, sticky tape for cable repair. Don't eat the tape too, Suki. Nope, she's worked hard today. She's here. She's done her maintenance. She's done her repairs. And she is here locked in and clocked in, ready for work. As you can see, absolutely fired up for the stream as usual. So we got a fun one today. One that I've been looking forward to. This is, well, we're going to start off with a little update from Skywatcher, specifically Jake Barber. There's going to be a lot of Barber in today's show. So get ready for that. And also Ross Coulthart as well. So we're going to be kind of bouncing between some recent clips from Jake Barber and some recent clips from Ross Coulthart. Basically, both of them seem to be very aligned on the idea that what is happening right now, like this is a spiritual phenomenon. This is something that is coming from within all of us. And it's very interesting to kind of see the dynamic shift this way. And I think it's a positive thing, personally. But yes, you are exactly right, Rob Laird. There will be absolutely no hair conversation in today's stream because both of the men featuring in it basically have none. Unfortunately. I mean, no, actually, Ross is still hanging on a little bit, but Jake, absolutely not. Gromank has gifted 5 memberships. Absolute legend, Gromank. Thank you very much. The generosity, I'm telling you, you guys are unreal. And Richo's put in $15. I made it out of surgery okay, guys. Thank you for all the well wishes. My man, I'm very glad to hear that. Glad you're feeling a little bit better, and I hope the recovery continues to go smooth. And Nerd Alert with $10 says, good work, Josh. Last night's stream literally blew my mind. Keep it up. Hey, don't thank me, man. That is all Terrence McKenna. I can't take any credit for that one. That man is an absolute genius. The captain of the weirdos. I'd say he's our icon. And Nerd Alert has gifted a membership as well. You guys, absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much. That one went out to Abby France. So Abby, make sure you say thank you. And to all of those new members, gifted or not, make sure you check out the members only content as well. There's a fair bit of stuff there for you guys to dig into. So let's jump over here. I want to kick off today's stream with a quote from Jake Barber. And that's because I recently did a stream basically covering an anonymous leak that popped up on Reddit, basically saying that Skywatcher had been like red teamed and that it's not what it was meant to be and that, you know, shit was going south. Now, since then, I've had a lot of conflicting messages that are in the public and also in private to me, people reaching out to me from places alluding to it being false, and then other people alluding to it being very real. And what I'm referring to there is the Reddit leak saying that Skywatcher has been, you know, corrupted or whatever you want to call it. So I'm unsure either way, but I think given that we did a whole stream on it, it's probably we should touch on the updates, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't know what the hell is going on. That's why we're here talking about it. So let's kick it off with Jake Barber's statement. So this was posted a couple of days ago, I believe, and I'm just going to read it out to you, and then we'll take a look at the comments. So Jake says, hello, folks. I'm pleased to provide an update. Skywatcher is here doing our thing. As you may have read or heard via a number of sources, including our official Skywatcher account, we have completed our first round of contracted field operations and have collected nearly 10 terabytes of data. We are now having that data processed and assessed in accordance with the independent verification and peer review outlined in our discovery framework. This process takes time and is crucial to informing future field operations. We have had success with both psionics and the dog whistle, neuromeditative interaction, and electromechanical signaling. And consider this data to be some of the best evidence gathered by a private entity on UAP. During this review phase, we aim not only to assess what we have gathered so far, but find ways to improve on the quality and diversity of data we gather, as well as innovate experiments to run. This will require collaboration with a number of third parties who hold the right, credentials, and authorities to help us dig deeper. I wonder who those third parties are. Expanding our team to include other individuals and entities with key talents, interests, and responsibilities related to the subject. Exciting times. Lastly, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us here that this work is the most exciting thing any of us has done. But Skywatcher is not a full-time job for any of us. We all spend the majority of our professional time doing a variety of things that pay the bills and further our careers. And this new industry developing in UAP studies, aerial intelligence, and CUAS is full of hope and opportunities for us as working professionals with a unique skill set and background. It is a blessing to have an industry forming that needs our niche, individual goods and services. Going to work at Home Depot is not really an option. No offense to Home Depot, it's one of my favorite stores. Ultimately, all of our individual ventures outside of Skywatcher allow us to bring more to the table for the Skywatcher mission. We all look forward to getting back to it. The adventure continues. Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember in an early, it might have even, well, there was only 2, and I guess that's why this whole thing feels a bit odd. There's only been 2 episodes, and it's September. But I'm pretty sure in like the first episode of Skywatcher, or maybe even in interviews leading up to the first episode, I swear it was Jake Barber, or maybe someone else, who was saying how grateful they were that people were funding Skywatcher and all the people involved to a degree that they were able to do it full time. I swear to God, I remember them saying that. Does that ring a bell for anyone, that like they were grateful that there were people out there helping them be able to do this full time? Is anyone in the chat remember that, or am I making this up? I swear I heard that. Now, again, I'm not saying Jake is lying here. A few people in the chat are saying they agree. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not going crazy. I mean, you know, I still might be, but at least I'm right on that. So, also, you know, they're talking about the psionics and the dog whistle. We're going to get into that a little bit today as well. All in all, you know, I think Jake Barber comes across as quite genuine. And but what I don't get is if this Reddit leak was just not true, what is the purpose in it? Like it was very long-winded. It was fairly well written, and it was anonymous. So no one's getting credit for that. If it's fake, then the person writing it would know that, and would know that all the time and effort that they've put into this is just going to be washed away with the rain when the next episode of Skywatcher comes out. So it just makes me wonder. Like, I just can't see any sort of motive for that Reddit post. You know, people say everyone wants their 5 minutes of fame, but, you know, when it's an anonymous post, it's kind of odd. And, you know, there's been a lot of secrecy. They haven't allowed any independent journalism. I think Skywatcher as a whole has just felt very strange, right? But Jake Barber did say in the Ross Coulthart interview that you will know him by his fruits. So let's keep reserving our judgment until we see that. So here are some comments. This is UFO Joe saying, great, still on schedule. And then he's quoting Jake Barber saying, what do the craft look like? Who is operating them? How are they being operated? And where are they coming from? We should be able to answer those questions probably entirely in the next 12 months. And Jake said that in this interview here with Ross Coulthart, which was where he came out with the egg story. A few other people weighing on this. Jack from Cosmic Road saying, thanks for the update, Jake. When can we expect part 3 of the video series to drop? I think a very fair comment from Jack there. Like, you know, all well and good saying this, but it's like this episode was meant to be out a long time ago. So this is all well and good, but what's going on? And why can't any journalist come and, you know, film with you guys? people say, you know, they're protecting their IP, but that doesn't stop other people filming in locations like that. Like, obviously, you can sign NDAs, you can, you know, isolate filming to a certain area or a certain day where certain things aren't being used. You know, I don't think protecting IP is a real excuse to not allow journalism. My man Marky saying, appreciate you and the work Skywatcher is doing. Shout out to Yoza. Is Skywatcher still exploiting indigenous psionics for profit? Always asking the hard questions, Yoza. I respect it. Generally, people seem happy to have an update from Jake, and I would agree with that. It is good to hear something. But I think now it's like we're all sort of getting a little bit sick of hearing things, right? We want to see things. We want to see some results. We want to see these fruits. So that's going to get us into today's show. We're going to hear from Jake talking a little bit deeper about his possession experience with this sort of positive entity. And I think this all kind of kicked off with this clip. I think this clip really kind of like put a marker on disclosure. And I think this is the way that it's going. And I think a lot of people here in the chat already know this and feel this. But for anyone who doesn't, you're probably going to after this stream. You might not agree with it. And I'm all for it. But I'm highlighting it not because I'm all for it. I'm highlighting it because I can see, in my opinion, that this is the way that it's going. And I think it's a good thing.
What do you want people to know right now? Like, what do you want people to know if you're just like fucking on?
You are not free. And this reality has far more to it than you have been allowed to believe. And God is real.
This reality has far more to it than you have been allowed to believe. There's far more to reality than you've been allowed to believe. What could that mean? What could that mean? That's what today's show is about. Before we get on to that, Gromanx gifted another membership. My man, thank you very much. That's 6 for you. Very generous. Melissa Messenger with $3. Thank you, Melissa. Susie with 3 says they sure the F word did. Absolutely. Thank you, Susie. Rogie T with $20 says, good to catch a live show again and give support. Rock on, Jedi Josh. Cheers, bud. Thank you very much. Jedi Josh, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I think I'll hold on to that one. Thank you, Rogie T. Stevie with a $5 says, Reddit guy posts a fake. UFO YouTubers and communities spend weeks talking about it, flooding the zone to confuse and obfuscate. Interesting point, Stevie. Interesting point. I think that's worth considering. However, if it is fake, though, it's not going to matter, right? It's not going to matter because if Skywatcher are still doing their thing, then they're going to come out and all the YouTubers like myself who spoke about it are going to look like a fool. But time will tell. And that's one of those things that I'll be happy to be wrong about. Absolutely. Daria's gifted a membership. Daria, you legend. Thank you very much. And Build on Sound with £2 says, Skywatcher is extremely sus in my opinion. Anyone else? I think you're very well within your right to feel that way. Absolutely. I'm not saying they are, but I think it's understandable to be feeling that way, especially given the topic that we're dealing with, right? Rob Laird with £10 says, hard to know what's real with Deep Jake. Great to be back. Been busy with my visual effects job, but taken this afternoon off. Nice, man. Shout out to you in the visual effects, my old industry. Deep Jake, are you alluding to like him being a deep fake? Is that what that is? Or am I misreading that? I haven't heard anything like that before, but it's interesting. Thank you, Rob. And Vern Dude has gifted 5 memberships. God damn. Vern Dude, you're an absolute legend. Thank you very much, my brother. All right. So, there is a lot more to reality than you have been led to believe, and God is real. I really believe that was a signpost on disclosure, and this is the road that it is leading us down. Here is Jake Barber on a podcast with Dennis Asberg and Dr. Beatriz Villarroel recently. This is in the last couple of days. We've got a few clips from this podcast.
How does I get closer?
And this is Jake going just a little bit deeper with a bit more information about his experience with this, with the egg and also the possession that he experienced.
To the object, I ended up getting an overwhelming sense of like I was possessed by something. And
come like that?
Yeah, well, it came on pretty strong. It felt like I've explained before, like a heartburn, like it swole up inside of me, but it was emotional. And the closer I got to the object, it intensified. And by the time I was over the object, flying, trying to lift it off the ground, I was in tears. Um, I didn't know if I thought maybe someone had drugged me, or I was having an emotional breakdown of some kind from just stress, cortisol. And it took everything I got to fly and pick this load up and fly away. And it's very busy work out there at night, flying as a single pilot. You know, I'm flying at the time was a twin engine helicopter that normally there's two pilots on board. I was the only pilot, just for security reasons. We try and minimize the crew. And I'm flying under NVGs in the mountains, running 3 radios at one time and a variety of instruments. So it takes my full concentration normally. And so I'm having this emotional, I don't know, I hate to say not a breakdown, but like an epiphany. It's like a life-changing moment. I felt possessed with the spirit of God is what it felt like to me. And it felt very feminine. It was different. You know, I'd been to church, I had prayed my whole life, and at times I thought I'd felt, you know, what the Holy Spirit felt like, or God touching me, or Jesus showering me with his love. But this was something different. There was a spirit I'd never felt before. It felt like a feminine energy, felt like the spirit of my mother. I felt like a deep sense of love for my daughter, my wife, my mother. It was like that kind of love, not like a fatherly or brotherly love. That's the only reason I describe it as feminine. And I also felt, I felt safe, like I wasn't insecure about my emotions. Like there was no shame. It was just a beautiful feeling. But I'd never felt like that before, and I began to feel like something was possessing me, and I thought I was going to have to pop the load off, and because I didn't think I was going to be able to continue. So I took everything I had to focus on my particular cues when doing this work and flying that helicopter, and I got it to the site, and I got rid of it, and when I flew away, the feeling went away. But ever since then, like it's never left me. Like that has never left. And I began talking about it to other friends, and I feel like whatever was in that object, or whatever was controlling that object, was also in my mind or in my consciousness. And so that led me to where I am today, which is realizing that there are parts of the research around and the operations around UAP and non-human intelligence that focus particularly on this aspect of it, which is there is a human consciousness connection with the beings that either operate these, or what we've come to find out through, you know, talking to other people involved in the legacy program. We all kind of talk now. You know, I spent 30 years living very isolated. Nobody talked.
Yeah.
And since 2017, we've been nervously peering over the cubicle walls, you can say, and exchanging information. And that has escalated to where we all talk like crazy now, and people from all portions of the program. And so me coming out with that story and sharing that, I think it was really valuable because of who I am and what my profession is. Like, I don't spend a lot of time out in the desert doing drugs and partying, right? So I have a very practical job. I have a very practical responsibility. My entire career has progressed because I'm someone that can be trusted to think clearly and execute on the mission under high stress situations, and be able to rely on my training and my pragmatic thinking. So for me to report such an out of this world, emotional, spiritual, intangible experience, I think really caused people to listen, and other people that have had similar experiences around the topic within the program, like material analysis, people that are working on the exotic material have had the exact same experience, where they report the material is alive and the material is conscious and the material connects to them. And so it seems to be the case that it's likely the craft in these circumstances It is reported, and it is further hypothesized that while some of the occupants, which are biological entities that we have in our possession, maybe something like soft tissue drones or meat robots is playing, where it's a biological artificial intelligence, but it doesn't have a consciousness or a soul. While that's happening, ironically, the craft is conscious.
Okay.
And the material in some of these crafts seems to be conscious. And it seems
This is like, well, first of all, like the end of last week, we did the stream with Colonel Philip Corso's son, right? And he was saying, he said this, and remember, that interview was from 2018, and he was saying the Roswell craft is a biological entity. It's a living entity. This is exactly what Jake Barber is saying. And not just that, he's also saying that the little beings that were found in it are biological robots that are connected to this craft as a means of controlling it. So that it's almost as if they are created with the craft. And that's something that we've heard as well, right? We've heard, I mean, I think Stephen Greer is probably the biggest one who's been saying that the Greys are programmed life forms. They are little androids, essentially, that can plug into these craft and pilot them. It's wild to hear Jake Barber. It's just weird when you hear people saying the same things that, you know, even Bob Lazar was saying in 1989 in regards to the craft and how it's controlled through consciousness.
To have an ability to interface with human consciousness, and it's just there, and it's part of it. And for whatever reason, it doesn't impact everyone, because a few of the guys that were working that night I have since talked to, they didn't have the same response that I had. But for some reason, that thing connected with me, either as it was ascending to heaven and made a pit stop, 200 feet up in the helicopter, or as crazy as it sounds, it brought me into and gave me purpose in this movement. And I still feel it's guiding me today. Like it's never left. I feel like I've matured with my understanding of what it is, and it's still an active part of my life. And it has guided me even here to meet you guys, as far as I believe. And so, yeah.
Okay.
It's really interesting. How are people in the chat feeling about Jake Barber and what he's saying here? Like, obviously, I feel like a lot of people, and whenever people seem to talk about like a divine feminine or some kind of special energy that has overcome him, like a lot of people tune out. A lot of people just like don't believe in that kind of stuff. But I really think when it comes to that kind of stuff, it really seems like if you don't believe in it, then that's true. Like, you're not going to experience it. But if you do open up your mind and like legitimately open up your mind and perhaps attempt it, or with like a genuine curiosity, what's that saying? Like, the longer you look into the abyss, eventually the abyss will stare back at you. I think belief may be the key. And if you don't believe in it, then that is what you will experience. But if you do, then you may experience something. I really think the framework, we got into a little heated argument about this the other day. The framework, this is my opinion, so don't get offended. I really think the framework is not what's important. And, that could be, maybe you're a spiritual person, maybe you're Christian, Catholic, whatever, Muslim. That doesn't matter. It's the belief that establishes the connection. There are lots of different pathways to get there, though. That's just my opinion. So we're going to play another little clip. We did touch on this one the other day. This is just a very short version for maybe anyone who missed the stream, because Ross Coulthart is feeling in a very same way. Let's listen to this. This is Ross Coulthart speaking to Kai Dickens from the telepathy tapes.
I find myself thinking as I listen to you and watch you on the odd videos that you've appeared in, you and I are going through something of a similar transformation. And I find myself getting more spiritual as I get into the UAP subject, the study of anomalous phenomena, which frankly includes psi ideas. I first met Julia at the Scientific Coalition for the Study of UAPs in Huntsville, and I thought, why is she here? You know, why is somebody who's studying neuroscience at a conference on UAPs? And then I got into the study of psionics and the idea that the government is secretly using people with alleged psychic abilities to try to connect with the phenomenon. And then I listened to your profound series, and the children are talking about connection, not just with mom, but with other beings, entities, spirits, angels. Was there a rationalist skeptic part of you that fought as much as I did to resist the notion that this was true?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was all really hard.
So there you go. Ross is saying himself that he's becoming quite spiritual through his research of psionics. Yes, mom. Through his research of psionics and consciousness and the things that he has been shown, the things that he has seen, and that, you know, they're also discovering people that are contacting other beings, other entities, and he even used the word angels, right? Again, this scares a lot of people away. The people who just want to know about nuts and bolts and the little green men and their little spaceships, this scares those people away. But and that's okay. I'm not going to try and tell you that you're wrong. I'm not going to try and convince you. But I just think what's important to remember here is that, like, communicating with whatever you want to call it, angels, a non-human intelligence, beings in another dimension, whatever you want to call it, people have been doing this for a long time and claiming that they are getting downloads, or, you know, again, that's a word that can be used interchangeable. I think downloads is probably the one that we're most familiar with, right? But people have been getting downloads. People have been channeling. Like, none of this stuff is new. So when people have been telling us the same story from, again, all over the world, different cultures, different frameworks of belief, some think they're speaking to God's angels. Other people think they're contacting alien entities called Bashar, right? But it seems like the crux of it is, and the most important part is that people are making contact with something or someone that's coming through a non-physical medium. This isn't new. Okay, this has been happening for a long time. Bleak with $5 says, I believe it. I'm a spiritual person, and him talking about a divine feminine hits home for me, and it solidifies a lot for me. Yeah, and you're not alone, dude. You're absolutely not alone. I think a lot of people share that. I think a lot of people might even share it, but they don't realize it because it's not being explained through their specific belief system. And I think that's another part, is people beginning to realize that this is very likely, a lot of it is the part of the same phenomenon being explained in different ways. But there are also other people who still need to come to terms with this whole concept because it is very foreign. And like we heard Carl Nell say recently in his speech at Rice University, the biggest problem we have with disclosure is people unlearning. People need to unlearn what they think they know about reality. If you've grown up your whole life thinking Santa Claus is real, and you swear to God he's real, you know he's real, and now someone's trying to tell you Santa actually isn't real, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you, all right? You're going to have to do a little bit of soul searching, pull up a few floorboards in the mind. It's not easy, but I think that's what has to happen before a lot of this stuff can sink in for people. And now we're going to listen to Jake even go further on that, because Jake is basically saying in this clip that he is going full woo. He's all in on the woo. And I think, like I said, that is where this seems to be heading. And by the way, guys, if you're enjoying the stream so far, please just scroll down, hit the like. It's quick, it's free. And as you guys know, if you bring your liked card at the exit of the stream, you get a 20% discount at your local mental health facility.
if it was just, say we prove that what you're seeing in your data is still out there. We have surveillance drones in our upper orbit that are non-human. Okay. If that's benign, it's like, yeah, there are snakes in the woods, but they don't really impact our everyday life. It's not a big secret. So it leads me to believe that not only are they there, but they are interacting with us, and they are interacting with us in a way that we can't control. And I think it comes down to control. I mean, since all we can do, or all I can do, is because I don't know. So we sit here and we do our best to reason and conduct our own thought experiments and come with our own hypotheses. Now, where I'm at with it, what I think might be going on, taking in everything I've learned in the last 6 years, plus my own personal experiences, I think there is a spiritual component to this thing. And I think it's a control. It's likely that our governments and agencies want to control the population. It's been that way since the time of Caesar. Stabilizing the Roman Empire and keeping the people happy was the number one priority, because then the empire falls apart. It's the same today. Our governments and even our world as a whole requires stability. And I think it's analogous to, if you look at the history of Christianity and Martin Luther and the Reformation, where Martin Luther was a rebel who basically said, you don't need to go through man to get to God. You don't need to go through the Catholic Church organization and those appointed in leadership at the time to have a relationship with God. You can have a personal direct line to God and not only ask him for things, but have his forgiveness and have all the fruits of a relationship with God can bring, and it bypassed the control and the power of the Catholic Church. I think, for me personally, that it's something like that. I think that if humans learn that there is something special about us that separates us from the animals, that we aren't just beasts, we are also something like a God, or have a portion of God, or a connection to the world around us and to other dimensions and to a higher level of consciousness, that it will be harder for governments to control and keep us suppressed. And that the elevating of our species would empower us in a way that would destabilize the current state of economics, politics, borders, wars. All that goes away when we transform ourselves to a higher quality of life and state of being. Now, I know that's kind of a very crazy woo-woo answer, but I'm sorry, that's where I'm at in my life right now. Like I'm woo in my thoughts, but I still have very practical responsibilities in my career, and I'm kind of torn between the two.
My man. He makes some great points there as well. I think, first of all, I really liked how he referenced the Roman Empire, right? And how it was important in the Roman Empire to keep the people sort of distracted and entertained, right? And, as I always reference many times, I use sports as a reference. I use Love Island as a reference, right? We have so many things in our culture that keep us distracted from actually going inside and trying to find that connection that Jake is saying we all have. Like, you can all find it. You don't need a religious framework to get there. But if you knew that, now you have all the power, right? Now you don't need something. Now there's no control structure is necessary. And I think this does go right back to the Roman Empire. And, there are a lot of, depending how deep down the rabbit hole you go and how many dots you like to connect, some would say the Roman Empire still exists today. It just has a different name. I think that's a valid theory. I really do think that's a valid theory. It's probably been reskinned and renamed many times, just like a lot of this psionics and consciousness and all that sort of stuff has been as well. None of this stuff is new. It all goes back a long time, but it gets a different name and a new coat of paint, and it feels like something different, when in reality, a lot of this stuff has been happening a long, long time ago. Bifta celebrating 5 months as a member. Jake Barber, Wu-Tang Clan. My man, looking fresh in that hoodie as well. Daz with $3. Kelly Speros has gifted a membership. Kelly, you are a generous little weirdo. Thank you very much. Mr. Badass, celebrating 1 month as a member, says, this is why disclosure is so important. It might finally open up the minds of those with their heads in the sand. We can only hope. We can only hope. And I think it's going to be, you know, it's a tough ask. I really do think it's a tough ask, but I think that's what has to happen, right? I can't see a way forward, given the state of society and the way things are right now. I can't see a way forward that doesn't have at least something to do with humanity. And look, I'm not saying we all need to become like mega religious and spiritual, but I really do think we, to some degree, need to at least shift a little bit to just returning to some of those like core teachings, core values that remind us how to be like civilized humans. Because I think, I mean, just look at the news. Everyone's protesting. Everyone's got a problem with someone else. We have lost the ability to coexist with each other when people have different opinions. And that's a problem because there's 8 billion people in the world. Pretty good chance not everyone's going to agree with you or see things the way you do or have the same religion as you or whatever. So we need to go back to some ideas and values and teachings that remind us that, hey, that's normal. That actually doesn't really matter. We're all human at the end of the day. Some people will like you, some people won't. It really doesn't matter. Let's all just get along, right? Daniel Ortega, you just wait for what's coming, my friend. You just wait for what's coming. James Anthony with $5 says, in 2027, when Trump, very soon, Putin and Xi Jinping are gone, NHI will reveal themselves. Interesting take. Is this a little download you've received, James? Where have you sourced this information, my friend? I'm into it. I'm into it, though. I'm here for it. Absolutely. I think, where did it go? Where did it go? All right. We'll move on. Actually, Tommy Bird says we've been played and continue to be played. I think that's exactly what Matthew Brown was saying, right? Matthew Brown has basically been saying that the world that you live in is so carefully controlled that you practically have zero idea about what is actually going on and what the truth about the world is. And, you know, there's a saying that people say that something like, you know, the biggest trick that was ever played is the biggest trick the devil played was convincing you that God isn't real, or that, you know, essentially that there isn't more to reality that that you just haven't been allowed to know. And okay, here's a question, right? Actually, it's not really a question. It's just kind of a line of thinking. We've done a pretty big deep dive into, you know, the satanic ritual abuse that goes on in society, specifically Hollywood, but also seems like I think we could just generalize it as like the elite rings of society. Again, not all of them. You can't paint them all with the same brush. But, you know, there seems to be a lot of pedophiles and a lot of Satanists in the elite rings of society. And, you know, I just base that off just quickly, like Jimmy Savile, prolific pedophile. In the 70s and 80s, he was the biggest star on TV. Everyone loved him. Was best friends with the royal family. Prolific pedophile. The royals are photographed on Epstein Island. Pedophile. Epstein is surrounded by all these people in politics and the entertainment industry, talking about $40,000 pizza parties. So if it seems like, based on all of that and obviously all of the survivors' testimonies, it seems like the people in these elite rings of society that would be privy to information that we are not, they take this interdimensional realm of rituals and connecting to other intelligences that seem to probably be negative. They seem to believe it and take it very seriously and partake in it. I mean, what the hell is Bohemian Grove, right? What is that? Okay, it's certainly not your average Sunday mass, that's for sure. So if that's true, which it certainly seems like it all is, then it would only make sense as a polarity that this interdimensional contact, these rituals can also be done for positive and for good, and that there is a positive element to this phenomenon. And I think that is what this is. This disclosure is trying to, I feel like it is like a spiritual war. I know that's a very corny term that gets overplayed, but when you look at it like that, on like the control structures that seem to have been in place for a long time, elite rings of society seem to be systemically involved in like pedophilia and child abuse. And now there's this push to break this like veil of secrecy. And it all seems to be about like divine feminine, positive energy. God is real. Return back to like a positive state of being. It seems like this is a push for good in a spiritual war, right? That's how I see it. And evidently, so does Jake Barber and Ross Coulthart. Achy Balls with $20. The first time I experienced the phenomenon, the metaphysical component was real and terrified me. When it continued, I felt compelled to seek out the truth. It can, but doesn't have to mean you turn to organized religion. 100%, man. 100%. And thank you for the generous super chat. And, you know, based on the little rant that I just gave, maybe someone new watching right now must be like, damn, this guy's like a religious lunatic. And you guys who watch the channel regularly would know, because I say it all the time, I'm not religious at all. Never have been. In fact, as a teenager, I used to rip on people who were religious because I thought it was all ridiculous and stupid, just like we've all been led to believe most of our lives, right? But when you spend enough time researching the UFO phenomenon and listening to people's accounts, looking at the history, really digging into the aspects that are beyond the nuts and bolts, because there is so much more to this than nuts and bolts, there is no other answer really that can provide answers. There's nothing else that can provide answers other than there being like a higher dimensional realm that is interacting with us, right? And let me just caveat that and say that doesn't mean that there isn't nuts and bolts as well. In fact, I think that this is all part of why disclosure is so complicated, because there is nuts and bolts UFOs. There really is circular discs that were flying around in the 50s and 60s that are not ours. That is real. And that could be a whole other component to this, that there literally could be non-human intelligences that are physical, that are humanoid, that kind of look like the typical aliens, that maybe live inside the Earth or they're from another planet. Who knows? That could all be real too. But so could this interdimensional spiritual aspect of things that seems to really be manipulating our society. I think it could all be real. As the Grand Maester Richard Dolan would say, what if it's all real? Bleak with $2 says, this stream is right up my alley. My man, shout out to you. And Bifta has gifted a membership. Thank you very much, bro. You're extremely generous. And the love in the stream is just always hitting new heights. Honestly, you guys are unreal. So let's go back to Ross now. This is on Ross talking about people contacting the afterlife.
All right, Ross, we will go to the next question from Zach Champeau. Hey, Ross, really loved your episode with Jake and Matt. Truly amazed at what Skywatcher is already accomplishing. The question here is, do you get the impression that there is knowledge in these programs pertaining to afterlife or continuation of consciousness after physical human death that is being kept from the public? If this is so, it would be really interesting to learn whether they have a means of communicating with a specific person who has passed on, given they're willing to communicate with them at all at that point.
Wow, this is a controversial area, of course, but yes, short answer. I had a meeting earlier this week with a guy who has had close encounter experiences where he believes he's been abducted. And in the course of my conversation with him, he told me that he also had an encounter with a spirit of a dead person who'd been murdered. And it was quite chilling, because after the fact I went away and I corroborated certain aspects of what he told me from independent news reports from the time that he was describing. Quite chilling to see that. I do think whatever the phenomenon is, it's too simplistic to describe it as extraterrestrials, little green aliens from the planet Zug, chugging from Zeta Reticuli at warp speed 5 for X hundred years to get to planet Earth and probe humans. I mean, I actually think it's more interesting than that.
Yeah, sorry to break it to you guys. There's no probing. I know some of you are disappointed, but I don't think that's what it is.
I do think that there is a distinct possibility that at the heart of all of this is it's also going to answer the ultimate question of what we are as humans. Are we merely meat robots, biological computers, where whatever our consciousness is, it resides in our brains and it dies when we die? Or is our consciousness part of something bigger? And do all humans, whether we realize it or not, have the ability to plug into a non-local consciousness? And could that explain how it is that people are able to allegedly communicate with the dead, or people who are not of this realm? That's an area I'm going down right now. It's funny, when I first got into this subject, I read Leslie Kane's excellent book about surviving death. And I was puzzled as to why Leslie had gone into the area of the afterlife when she'd been covering the UFO subject. And why did she write this excellent book on UFOs and then go on to the subject of the human spirit and spiritualism and the idea of human bodies surviving death? Now I understand the two are inextricably linked. And I'm on this journey as much as you guys are. I'm excited, really excited by what I get in the way of information on a daily basis. Some of it overwhelming, thousands and thousands of emails a week. But one of the consistent things that I get are people who assert an ability to communicate not only with entities from another realm, be it perhaps, I don't know, interdimensional or extra dimensional. I've got no idea.
Ross's tapping on the table is killing me.
They're also asserting an ability to communicate with not only the dead, but people all around the world. I mean, I've seen things in the last few months that defy explanation. What fascinates me, though, about modern science is if you don't look, you don't find. And one of the problems, one of the issues I have with science, conventional science, is it has this dismissiveness about non-materialist science, that essentially ideas of the paranormal must be complete BS because they can't be.
And that just echoes what I was saying before. If you don't look, you don't find. And this is like, it's kind of what I'm saying about belief. If you don't believe in it, obviously you're not going to look for it, but like the belief is like the initial lock. You're never going to be able to experience something if you don't believe it. Like you're not giving yourself a chance to even experience it.
And there's been a tendency, I think, not to even do the research into these ideas. And now at the cutting edge of science, there are people like, for example, Professor Stu Hameroff, talking about the idea of a non-local consciousness. There are people like Gary Nolan talking about the Caudate-Putamen part of the brain, which it's theorized in some people might be larger than in other people and might allow those people an enhanced ability to communicate in the way that we're describing. Are there some people with literally different shaped brains which gives them the ability to connect their pineal gland with the universe? And I think, for one, that's a very exciting concept. And I think we should be doing the science. Let's science it. And that, frankly, is what Skywatcher's doing. Full credit to them. They're using psionics. And that's a wonderful thing, that we're doing funded research to actually examine this idea. Because it's bloomingly obvious to me that the United States and other countries, particularly Russia, have secretly been working on psionic technology for much of the last 50 or 60 years. And as Jake Barber says, we don't need the state to prove or enhance what we've already done. We can do it ourselves. And that's what's really exciting about this, is citizen science can prove what the security state has suppressed. And that's why I think we're on the edge of a new paradigm, perhaps the cusp of a discovery that will be momentous, that could be earth-changing. Humans are about to discover a capacity, I suspect, that they never even knew they had.
Interesting, right? He's talking about the pineal gland being, or the Coulthart putamen. Yeah, that's what it is. Being instrumental in people who have this like psionic ability, right? And interestingly enough, what you see here, the Eye of Horus, is modeled after the pineal gland. Just a little fact that maybe some of you didn't know. But also, how long was that clip? That was a 6.5 minute clip. This is why I interrupt clips a lot, because I can't really remember what he said at the start. Okay, this is what an ADHD brain is like. We really have to speak in the moment, and I've sort of let myself down by not doing that because I can't really remember what he was talking about at the start. Although he did mention near-death experiences, right? And Leslie Kane wrote a book on that. I would love to look at some near-death experiences together on the stream. If that's something you guys would be interested in, I think that would be a really fun idea to do soon. Brad James at $2 says, "Good job, Josh, I believe." I guess that means I'm doing a good job. If you believe it, I guess I am. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Coulthart Putaman mentioned Gary Nolan's third eye lights up. Absolutely. Absolutely. He's the one plugging it. And it certainly seems like there is something to it. And, you know, I wonder if in the future, you know how like, you know, in the last like 30 or 40 years, it's been like the common insult to call someone like a pin dick, or like you have a small dick. In the new world, it's going to be like, you've got a tiny pineal gland, bro. You fucking loser. You can't even tap into the wider consciousness field? Dude, no one's hanging out with that guy. Go back to the zoo and watch Love Island, dude. You and your tiny little Coulthart Putamen. Get out of here. No one wants to hang with you, bro. You're never going to get a girlfriend. All right, this is Jake on the darker side of the phenomenon.
On the darker side, you know, I hear people talk about the abduction phenomenon is a real thing, and that our governments can't protect us from some of the more the bad NHI. If there are ET out there, there are good and bad, just like there are good and bad humans, and that there are predatorial NHI, perhaps. There are highly credible stories and reports of that, even at high level. And so, you know, what do you do with that as far as, but that's one of those things too. I think we've gotten to a place now where we're so advanced, we don't have the same threats that our ancestors had when it comes to wild animals. I mean, if you were an Indian living on the plains, you had to deal with mountain lions and bears, the fear of them abducting your children, and we all survived that and dealt with it. It just happens on such a, you know, it's just so infrequent that if there are aliens abducting people, it's better that we know that than not know that.
Do you think there's a deal?
Interesting point what he's saying, right? I mean, he's basically saying that the abduction phenomenon is something that we cannot stop. Like, we don't have anything in our arsenal to prevent that from happening. And that is why that's a hard thing for us to admit. We don't want to tell people that we can't stop some advanced aliens abducting us, right? This is what Lieutenant Colonel John Blitch said early in the year. And who else has said it? Someone else has said it, that that the abduction part of the phenomenon, because like I said, I think there's many aspects to this. The spiritual side is one, the abduction, ETs. This is a very complicated story. And as it would be, right? Because, and you know, maybe if they'd have been transparent since the beginning, it wouldn't be such a hard story to tell, because in the beginning, it would have just been one thing. And then as new things were learnt, the transparency would continue. There's almost 100 years of shit they need to fill us in on here, okay? This is probably going to be a really long, twisted, and wild story that, as I've said, is going to require a lot of unlearning. A lot of unlearning. But the abduction phenomenon, like he said, is just like when we were you know, in a much more in a previous state of our existence where it was normal to be worried about lions eating us or being attacked by wild animals and things like that. And that the truth is we aren't the top of the food chain, and that there are things out there that can do this to us. And that knowing that just needs to become, it might be a little shock at first, but it might just also need to become part of our existence. Get used to it. That's life. That, you know, if that is the actual truth about life, of course you'd want to know. You're not going to, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Freak out and cry? And then what? Eventually you'll stop crying and you'll have to just get used to it. Okay? That's it. You're not the biggest and strongest thing. Something else is. Okay? You're upset, you cried. Cool, get over it. Welcome to the world. John Anthony with $50. That is a big old red super chat. He says, amazing work, Josh. I believe that we are all fractals of God. My gut tells me that the separation between the 12 dimensions that Darius J. Wright has visited during his OBEs is slowly being eroded, and that's why we may be experiencing the phenomenon. Thank you, my man. That's a huge super chat, by the way. Extremely generous of you. I really do appreciate that. And I love what you've said as well. But you know what? I think that everyone is probably everyone experiences it in their own way and on their own time. This is another thing. Like, we can't, like, and I'm not saying anyone is, but you can't force this stuff on people, right? I mean, you know, no one likes a Bible basher, right? And I'm not saying this is about religion, but I've always found personally that when it comes to this kind of stuff, and even like UFOs and whatever, if someone doesn't want to know about it, you're only going to cause more damage or make them not want to know even more by trying to force it on them. I really think the best way is to show them, not even directly, but just like embody it, be a role model, and show people that, like, you don't have to behave that way, you don't have to act that way, you don't have to react like that. You can live in a much better way that doesn't cost anything. And when people who are stuck in like a lower state of being, who feel maybe like a bit of a victim or blame other people and it's always someone else's fault, if people can see that kind of role model in their life, they will probably subconsciously start to look at how that person is and begin to literally still maybe even subconsciously change their own behaviors, because they'll think, well, their life isn't shit. They've got all these good things going on. I wish my life was like that. Maybe I should be more like that. I think that's natural human behavior, right? To kind of imitate and replicate what works. But we're also very stubborn creatures. So that same person could look that person in the eye and say, you need to do this, this, and this to fix your life. And our stubborn ass would be like, motherfucker, don't tell me what to do. This is my life. Don't tell me what to do. But if my life is going to shit and you're over there with brilliant success, I'm probably going to be subtly side-eyeing, going like, what's this motherfucker doing? I might have to start doing that. Okay. All right. It's the ego. Yes. It's the ego. Absolutely. And, you know, ego isn't always a bad thing either. I don't think it's like inherently bad, like it sort of always is portrayed, but it can get in the way, especially if you're in a low state of being. Tamara says, hell yes, stubborn Capricorns. Shout out to the Capricorns. You don't want to cross a Capricorn. We got no time for messing around. Bleak celebrating 4 months as a member. Sit back and enjoy the show. My man, appreciate you. Thank you very much. All right, let's finish off this clip.
I know that I've talked about it many times on different pods. And is any deal between our governments and the aliens?
Yeah,
regarding adoption.
I've heard reports of that from very credible places at the highest level. There are stories of that. Again,
sorry, just because I spoke for a while there in case anyone's lost. Dennis just basically said, I've heard about agreements and like agreements between aliens and government and abductions taking place with these agreements. And Jake is saying Yes, I have heard that from credible people. Agreements with aliens. Jake Barber is saying, yes, I've heard that.
Not from just random people hanging out at the park. Like, this is from very high levels, that there are perhaps agreements with other races that have a presence on this planet and maybe have been here for a very long time and have lived here. Like, maybe we aren't the top species on the planet. But a deal, like, I don't, that's just weird. A deal even feels, why would a superior life form have an agreement with, I don't know.
But
it's weird there, though, because he kind of backtracks a little bit there. He kind of goes, but a deal sounds weird. A deal, he's like, oh, I don't know about that. And then this could just be me being sus. But I've sort of felt like after we've got about a minute left of this clip, it kind of feels like his body language goes a bit different here. Like he feels a bit maybe like he overshared or said something he maybe shouldn't have just then. This is just me speculating here. I don't know that. But when we continue the clip, maybe I'm interested to see what you guys think. L Asteroid says ego can block downloads. I 100% agree with that. And I think that is because when you have a closed mind, when you might get something that people could call a download, you aren't even open to the, like, put it this way. I definitely feel like I've had and get downloads sometimes. You know, I'm not saying like I'm some kind of prophet, but I definitely feel like I experience this sometimes. But it took me to sort of like differentiate my own thoughts and what could be called like a guiding voice. Like when you start to realize that there are kind of like sometimes different channels running in here, that's when you can start to work out like, where did that come from? How did I get that idea in my mind that I have to sit here for 20 minutes working out, like unpacking? Why do I have to unpack my own thoughts? Don't I create my own thoughts? That's weird. How did I get this idea that I'm sitting here trying to understand? How do you have an idea that you don't even understand, right? I've had that many times. And I'm not special, by the way. I'm sure lots of people in this chat have. So let's keep an eye on Jake Barber here. Let me know what you guys think. I feel like he thinks he overshared. Someone says that's multiple personality disorder, Josh. Hey, it might be. It might be. But maybe the power of belief comes into that. If I believe that, maybe I'll end up in a psych ward. If I don't believe that, and I believe it's a download, maybe I'll come up with a company that I can sell on the stock exchange, like Tim Taylor. Who knows? I think belief is powerful. All right, let's keep an eye on Jake Barber here.
Okay, what how I'm thinking then is the people with the power and the control.
Yeah.
And also the religion. You have the church and the Christians, and there are lots of religions.
Fidgeting with the elbow a little bit.
Of course, and the power, oil and energy and everything. They
lots of yeahs. Hasn't been saying yeah while Dennis has been talking so far.
Don't really want us to get the UAPs and aliens into this.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Because if we, prove that we are not alone, they will do everything to stop us. They want to keep the control. Don't you think so?
Well, I think that's why we see such a violent reaction.
Especially if there's technological advancements that could be made overnight that make electricity and oil and gas obsolete. Like we hear the term 0 point energy sometimes. If you could extract energy from the atmosphere unlimited, then that's ultimate resource freedom, and that probably doesn't fare well for people in power.
Absolutely it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. So there's that's the last clip of Jake that we've got. That is from the Dennis Asberg's podcast, which I'll make sure when I do the chapters tomorrow, I will leave links to all this stuff in there if you want to go check out the full thing, which I would recommend you guys do, actually, because it's a really interesting podcast. It's a kind of like a nice, wholesome podcast. Beatrice does speak in it quite a bit. She speaks about her findings in her paper. They all actually speak equally. I just cut up the Jake Barber clips because that's what today's show is about. But I highly recommend it. I'll make sure I leave it linked below. And just for the record there, with Jake, I don't know if he maybe overshared or not, but it was interesting. He definitely did do like a little bit of a backflip, it seemed like, with what he said. But who knows? Maybe he misunderstood Dennis at first and then was like, wait a second. It's interesting either way. Very interesting what they're talking about. So we've got one more clip here from Ross. And this isn't necessarily
This is from @LeeGuy815.
This isn't necessarily super relevant to the show in terms of the spiritual aspect, but I think it's worth looking at in terms of Ross and how people view him, because he gets a lot of shit, and we talk about this on the show a lot. But I think Ross becomes very transparent here about his own views about mainstream media and his own skepticism and his own sus radar that he has on mainstream journalism and kind of how he got to where he is today and how he looks at things. So I just think this clip's important for people who are maybe on the fence about Ross or maybe don't like him, because I think it's it's quite revealing personally. And I do think Ross operates from a good, honest place. Peter said that we are this close to all being part of a psych ward. Yeah, probably, Peter, probably. And that is why when you enter the stream, if you haven't already, like the stream, it's free, it's quick, it helps the channel a lot. And when the stream is over, you get a 20% discount at your local mental health provider. And like you said, we probably are all going to need that.
9. Hi, Ross. I know the chance of you replying to my question is small. Not truly. We got you. But why do you think that mainstream media doesn't report about the UFO subject? Is that they don't want to look like fools, or are world governments stopping them, or is it a bit of both?
Do you know, there's a saying in my line of work, and there's a very vulgar way of saying it, but I'll say it this way, which is always assume a screw up before a conspiracy.
Ross, that was so vulgar. I'm sorry I played that on stream, guys. That was a bit much, wasn't it?
And that's driven my work in investigative journalism for the full length of my career.
I was just talking about satanic pedophiles for 30 minutes, so bloody Ross. Now he's saying the word screw on stream. Jesus.
That when you look at something normally inside government, 9 times out of 10, it really is a balls up than a conspiracy. You know, people very rarely act in concert together to do horrible things. More often than not, the cover-up follows the mistake, and essentially the cover-up is a consequence of trying to hide the mistake. In the media, I don't believe that there is a grey man going around telling the media how to write their stories. But I do know that in major newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, there is an inordinate influence through the national security correspondents by the Pentagon and the intelligence community. Because if you look at the front page of the Wash Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Boston Globe, all of the great newspapers of America, they are dependent on a relationship with very senior people in the intelligence community. And look, I've been there. I've done similar things here in Australia. If you keep your nose clean, you get invited to sit down and have a quiet chat with the boss of the intelligence agency, and they give you a very interesting briefing off the record. And this happened to me prior to the Iraq War, where we were all being told there were weapons of mass destruction. And I was given briefings by people in the intelligence community assuring me that we could be very confident as journalists that there were weapons of mass destruction. And then, of course, I followed the war, and I went with different units into Iraq, and of course there were no weapons of mass destruction.
Wasn't it Netanyahu that was like pleading with America that there were, and like America kind of followed them into that war? Kind of seems like the same thing is happening 20 years later. That's crazy. That's crazy, dude.
And I'm sorry, I will go to my grave believing that there were people in US intelligence and the government who knew full well that that was a lie and that the media allowed itself to be manipulated. And that, to me, was a real turning point in my journalistic understanding of that relationship between the intelligence community and media. And I've learned to be much more skeptical because of my own mistakes, which I made and which almost every other person in the media made, that we chose to believe the assertions being made by government. I had whistleblowers privately telling me at the time.
See, I feel like Ross is being super candid here. He's saying, like, yeah, I fell for the bullshit. I took the bullshit. And, you know, like, it's still possible that he is still getting led with bullshit and he doesn't know. But I think the fact that, like, he's being very candid and open about the fact that, like, he's aware of, like, what the intelligence agencies do with journalists to propagate a story, to win over the support of a population, to do whatever the government wants to do. Like, I think this is important for people to hear.
Time, people who'd been on the weapons inspection teams in Iraq, who were actually saying to me privately, you should be really skeptical about these claims that there are weapons of mass destruction. I don't believe it, they were telling me. And I thought that person was wrong. As it turned out, they were right. And
admitting when he's wrong takes a man to do that.
I think that's what's driving a lot of the media at the moment, that there's been so many good stories that have been leaked to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and there is this servile relationship between the national security correspondents, the defense correspondents, and those sources. And if you don't peddle the story the way they want you to peddle it, you don't get invited back for the private briefing. Now, frankly, I'm at the point as a journalist where I think often those private briefings are a complete waste of time because, as we know from the Iraq example, the media were flatly lied to, or the people that were doing the briefing were self-deluded. They really should have known better. And it remains, I think, one of the most ignominious moments in US intelligence. It's
kind of wild how, like, Netanyahu basically dragged America into that war 20 odd years ago. And now basically the same thing is still happening. And in between that time, this guy called Jeffrey Epstein, who seems to be a Mossad agent and kind of seems like has some kind of like blackmail ring that implicates like almost all the politicians and people at the top of science. And that there's this list of people who are on his island, but for some reason that list won't come out. And we're still following them into whatever war they want us to do. That's crazy, dude. Why would that happen? Why? Kind of seems like someone's compromised or something. Why would they keep following them? That's crazy.
Why, I guess, I do think the media needs to be more skeptical. And that's the thing that I've realized. I mean, I've done kind of like a doctorate in ufology. I've started out thinking that the whole subject matter was complete bollocks and that I was going to disprove it and find out that it was some secret US research program. And I would commend to any journalist in mainstream media to do the work that I've done, because as you go down this path, there is an aha moment where you go, holy hell, this is real. It is, it's real. And this is the thing, I think in 20 or 30 years' time, when this is an open secret, that the public knows that there is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, they will look back at moments like reality checks where we've talked about what we've talked about, and they will question, why didn't the media know this? Why didn't they report what people like Ross Coulthart, Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, Christopher Sharp, some of the people who are covering this issue,
Josh from Polarity,
Nation, you know, why wasn't this being picked up in media? And frankly, I think it will be recorded as the turning point of a transition, that all of these big masthead newspapers no longer have the resources they used to have. When I worked for the Sydney Morning Herald, for example, I was part of an investigative team where you could spend 6 months looking at a story. They had so much money to resource and investigate. Now, they're very lucky if they can scratch together 1 or 2 reporters to investigate a major story. And it's a big problem. The money is going out of the business, and it's going online. And that's the problem, is that there's not something replacing, there's no institutional media online yet that's replacing what's been happening for 50, 60, 70 years in institutional mainstream journalism. The free-to-air networks, they're all effectively going broke. CBS, NBC, ABC, they're slowly dwindling into irrelevance. We get bigger numbers, I'm not being arrogant about this, but we get bigger numbers on Reality Check than most free-to-air television networks get with their TV shows.
Yes, Ross, go off. Go off, King.
And it's not talked about. And it's a really interesting issue here that what's happening is most media is not online, but my kids, a lot of people's kids watching this, they're getting most of their information from shows like this online. They're not getting it from free-to-air media or newspapers. My kids don't read newspapers. They don't watch TV news. They think it's hilarious when my wife and I sit down and watch the evening news, you know, sitting there waiting to be spoon-fed the evening news in between advertising.
I love the way he says that with his hands like this. Like, we just sit there waiting to be spoon-fed the news in between advertisements. Like, he doesn't really go any deeper on it, but like that is, he's taken a huge dig at just how ridiculous mainstream media is, sitting there literally getting spoon-fed by news outlets that are in the pockets of all these big corporations that are only going to peddle stories that benefit these massive corporations, that do not have the audiences, the people who are sitting there waiting to be spoon-fed, do not have their best interests at heart. And there is a whole generation of people that are still doing that. They sit there and just get spoon-fed, and they don't question what's on that spoon. They just eat it, and they eat it up, and they lick their bowl clean at the end. This is why YouTube and independent media is getting bigger and bigger, because as this shift takes place, people are just no longer as oblivious as we used to be. I think someone made a comment earlier, like, with the whole Netanyahu thing back in the beginning of the Iraq War, early 2000s, you know, we were just, and it's no one's fault, by the way. Like, this isn't, I wouldn't even say we were dumb back then. It was just like, it was a different time. We just didn't know. I guess that's the best way to say it. But like, now that people know, if people knew and people weren't changing, that would be a problem. But now that people know, the mainstream media is dying. And I think in probably another 10 years, it will be basically gone. I think, you know, there'll still be TV and TV stations, but, you know, no one cares about it anymore.
Kids get it from Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, which frankly to me are completely alien ways of extracting news. But what's happening at the moment is there is a transition where mainstream media is largely becoming irrelevant, and nothing underlines their growing irrelevance more than their failure to properly cover the issue, this massive story of UAPs.
And I think Ross really hits the nail on the head there, because first of all, I just think that was a great piece from Ross, because even myself, as an Aussie I grew up watching Ross do those reports on Iraq on 60 Minutes. Like, I grew up watching this guy, right? So I've always been a supporter of him, and I've always felt like he's an honest guy, and I still do think that. But even I, you know, covering this channel, especially like in the earlier days of News Nation, when he had like Lou Elizondo, you know, under his arm and things like that, I understandably, like many of us, I'm sure, did think, you know, is this guy getting led astray? Like, is he getting, you know, co-opted by these weird intelligence people? And maybe he has, and maybe he did, and maybe he's even worked that out. But he definitely is not the kind of guy that's just going to go live on News Nation and be like, XYZ are frauds, XYZ are intelligence assets. But one thing I will say is I haven't seen Ross talk to Lou Elizondo for a long-ass time. I haven't seen Lou Elizondo on News Nation for a long-ass time. Used to be pretty prominent. Obviously, you know, he's, ever since the whole chandelier debacle, that's not so much been the case. But even before then, you know, I have noticed there's been a bit of a separation and distancing between Ross and a few people that used to appear regularly on these programs. So I think, like I said, whether Ross has been fed the wrong things at times, I don't know. But what I do think is he operates from a place of he wants the truth and he wants humanity to benefit from this. And he absolutely hit the nail on the head with the fact that the cat is so out of the bag with this UFO topic that, especially with obviously the younger the generations are, the more aware we are, because we're all on real media, authentic media like this, where the stories are out there because they're getting posted by real people who don't have an agenda, right? The fact that it's just so prevalent and still the mainstream media are refusing to talk about it, it's like you're just digging yourself a grave. You're highlighting how disingenuous you are by refusing to cover what is clearly like one of the most important stories of our time. A story that, not only is answering the question of like, are we alone in the cosmos? One of the biggest questions that has existed, but also answering, I think this question is also going to give us the answers to like, who are we? Why are we here? How did we get here? What is our actual purpose? What is our position in the hierarchy of beings? What else is here? I think the answers to those questions come with discovering the truth. And the fact that it's so prevalent and that the mainstream news doesn't want to talk about it, they're literally just digging their own grave, shooting themselves in the foot, and it probably won't be long until they are just completely dead and buried. And my God, it can't come soon enough. So, Suki, what do you think? All right, fair enough. Not that interested. Still, I think feels a little bit guilty about chewing the cable, but that's okay. That's okay. You're a dog. These things happen. Trevor Brett, you little freak, Trevor. I can tell. What are you doing in that? What are you doing in that picture? Are you holding a fish? Yeah, you're a freak. I can see it. Thank you for joining, bro. I appreciate that. Go and check out the members only content. Shout out to Michael Phillips, Third Eye Drops in the chat. If you guys haven't seen the interview that I did with Michael, Third Eye Drops, on his channel, go and check that out. Great dude, great channel, great content. We also had a really fun conversation over there as well. And hopefully, no, well, not hopefully, he will, just a matter of when, be on the channel, hopefully this month. I'm hoping it's going to be this month, Michael. We'll tee that up. I'm just trying to organize a few other things. But Michael Phillip coming on the show. Looking forward to that, my man. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think to put a little ending on this show today, it really does seem like that disclosure has a very big spiritual element to it. And that, as Matthew Brown said, there is far more to reality than we've been allowed to know. And I think what that is the fact that we can communicate with things. We all have this thing in us to establish this connection with a higher intelligence. Maybe people could call it God, whatever that means for you, or maybe entities as well. And this isn't necessarily a negative thing. I think there's a positive to it, because if the world is ran by satanic pedophiles doing ritual abuse, that means there must be a positive side to it, right? Because that's polarity. Guys, thank you all for hanging out tonight. I had a great stream. I hope you learned something. Please, on the way out, smack the like button. Just give it a little tap on the bum. It's all good. It's all love. I appreciate it. Be good to each other. Be kind. Touch grass. Keep 1 foot out. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.